So that is so we look at all the financial budget statement and also the report, how do you call it, annual account, how funds are being utilized.
So it's more documentation.
Yes.
And you had access to all of that?
Yes. I mean, the budget statement is a public statement, and Auditor's General report and annual, every ministry at the end of the year, you have to prepare your account, how funds were utilized.
Right.
Yes.
So let's go now into research findings, indeed. So Ghana collected approximately 55% of its taxes from indirect taxes, and that's according to the research. And we're talking the VAT, the excise duties and customs duties, correct?
Yes.
So we're talking about how that's poor. Okay, so it says that the poor is overly exposed to indirect taxes.
Yes.
That is what the research further highlighted.
Yes.
And so, can you explain first of all exactly what this finding means?
Okay. So we have two types of taxation: direct taxes and indirect taxes. Direct taxes are the ones that are taken directly from you. Like government can come straight to you and say, "Appear, pay this amount of money." And these are, example is the PAY, pay as you earn. That one is direct to you. And then the indirect taxes are taxes that are put on goods and services. And so indirectly, whenever you talk on your phone, you pay taxes. Whenever you go and buy items from the shop, there's a VAT on it. Fuel that we buy, there are indirect taxes on it. Now, the research shown that the poor Ghanaians are overly exposed to indirect taxes. For example, the poor lives in a community where there is no access to a potable water. So the poor feeds on sachet water. And the sachet water which the poor is drinking is the same water that the rich man is also drinking. And then there is a tax on sachet water. And so so that you see that the poor is paying the same margin of tax, same percentage of tax as the rich. But in a proper tax design, tax should be more progressive than regressive. Progressive would mean that the higher you earn, the more you pay. That is how direct taxes are normally structured. But indirect taxes is like that it's just flat. If VAT is 15% on goods and services, whether you are rich or poor, you pay 15. You pay that particular percentage. And you look at women, for example, women are even more of victim because most of the things that women use, there are also a lot of taxes on them. And that is also kind of widening the inequality gap between the rich and the poor. In fact, the study saw increasing level of inequality in the country between those period, simply because of how a lot of their money goes into taxes. So in countries, what some countries have done is that to be able to reduce the overexposure of the poor to indirect taxes, they have kind of taken the items that fall into the consumption basket of the poor and either reduce the tax margin, the taxes on it, or take them off. But in Ghana, almost everything that we consume, we have now there's a flat VAT that we pay on goods, and so that doesn't, whether you are rich or poor, you are paying the same. And I think that doesn't help the poor, and it's worsening their plight.
I'm looking at, for instance, the issue of the petroleum tax.
Yes.
And how that some school of thought suggests that in the first place, this is not something that you should be taxing. Some have as well suggested that we probably do not know how to, raise revenue as a country. Do you share these views?
Yes, I sincerely share these views. One, because the economy is largely informal, and so government is unable to identify people and tax them properly. And so government kind of put indirect taxes on goods and services.
Which is like the lazy man's approach.
The lazy man's approach. Instead for us to modify and invest in data collection and national ID system, so that even if you are earning 2 cedis in a small garden somewhere, you will be required to pay taxes. Like you go to the UK, if you work in 3 different places, at the end of the week or at the end of the month, you pay, though 3 places, each of them pay you independently from each other. But at the end of the month, you pay the correct tax margin that you are required to pay. But here, we've not been able to invest a lot of resources in our tax collection system. And so we kind of do the low-hanging fruit. There are a lot of taxes on petroleum. And putting the special, initially it used to be 17.5 and it came to 15%. Now it has come down again. But we think that that tax, to me, government should take it off, if especially on diesel, because diesel is what brings food from the cars that bring food from the rural areas, and also passenger transport. For petrol, I think it's fair.
There's actually a message here, and it kind of ties in with what you're saying. And this person wants to find out how governments can use taxation as a tool to fix or reduce the inequalities in our system. I mean, this is actually where I was going, considering the explanation that I'm getting. We're talking about how that we're probably, because of the large numbers in the informal sector, we're unable to do proper taxation or taxing to ensure that everybody is captured in, the tax net. And so then, by that, government is looking at other ways, the reason why they're charging you and I petroleum and all of that, which the experts, according to them, think that, may not necessarily, be the best ways forward. But once again, I think that you were making the point about the diesel.
Yes.
Yeah, you can continue on that.
So the diesel, cars that runs on diesel, the cars that brings food from rural areas to the cities, and those cars is what the poor, the trotros, and the buses that the poor normally take. And so if you put special petroleum taxes on diesel cars, then you kind of you worsen the plight of the poor. For taxis, we know that petrol is more for private cars and taxis and the Ubers, and that one, it is known that those who have got their own means are those that drive those cars. And at least, if nothing at all, government should take away the special petroleum taxes from the diesel and then put it on petrol in such a way that this one become more like a targeted. That is one. And also 2, it is very lazy approach for us to also rely heavily on taxes on petrol as a way of balancing the budget. There's one area that we've also seen is capital gain taxes. And if you want people build a house and they sell it in excess of what they built it for, and they make a huge margins, and per the law you are required to pay capital gain tax on those properties, but we are not paying it, and it's like we are always doing the lazy approach. In fact, the research also, we've also found out that one area that government can get revenue is also in the area of property taxes. But there is a conservative estimate that, for example, AMA can make not less than 2 billion Ghana cedis annually from property taxes. And in most countries, property taxes is what various cities and metropolitan agencies use to run their education system, police, fire, and healthcare. So, for example, if AMA is able to raise 2 billion cedis from property taxes, then it can even support public education in Accra. It can even employ more teachers, more supervisors, and even furnish the public schools so that people, the poor, can also have access to a quality education. Currently, the public schools in our cities is not in the good shape, and government is spending so much money on it. But then most Ghanaians wouldn't want to take their children to public schools because of the environment in which the schools are. But in most countries, 99% of their people take their children to public schools. But in Ghana, the middle class, we are all taking our children away from the public school because of this neglect. So fiscal policies, taxation that we raise from the assemblies raised from the consumers, from people who have got the means, can be used to support the, look at sanitation. AMA can get money to improve on sanitation in Accra. There are some areas you go to, especially East Legon and the gated community. Those people can pay more for property taxes, and then the money can be used to improve sanitation in other areas and reduce the inequality in the settlement areas within the city.
All right, well, so it is 8:05. We're still looking at the issue of taxation, and of course, exactly how that we can use it as that tool, you know, to fix all the inequalities in our system. We're joined by Deputy Finance Minister, the Honorable Kweku Kwarteng. Honorable, if you can hear me, good morning, you're live.
Good morning.
Right, so this is a research that was done by CUTS, and CUTS happens to be the Consumer Unity and Trust Society. They're talking about how that we can use our fiscal policies as a country to better address all the inequalities that we have in the system. Indeed, some of the findings, as captured here, suggests that the poor is overly exposed to indirect taxes. What do you say of this?
Well, to start with, I'd like to thank my brother. The name again, please. The brother in the studio.
Apiakusi Adomako.
I'd like to thank Mr. Apiakusi Adomako for their research. I will be happy to see a copy so that as we fashion out tax policies, we can take some of the recommendations and findings they have made into account.
Right.
But it is important that I make a couple of comments in response to the issues that you have raised already. First, we have to understand that indirect taxes are by their nature consumption taxes. That is to say, the more you consume, the more you pay. So if you take, say, even the fuel that he referred to, if you look at the amount of fuel, even the diesel, and the research you pay attention to the consumption patterns of these products. Diesel is no more a product consumed by, if you like, poor vehicles. I mean, the traditional assumption is incorrect. These days, you have many of the V8s in the street owned by rich people on diesel. And the statistics, if you engage the National Petroleum Authority, has taken that away. It is a reason you would see that it has reflected in the pricing difference between diesel and petrol. So that point has to be taken on board, and I recommend to them that they should take a closer look at that part. But that is a small point. The broader point I'm making is that you would see a rich man with a big vehicle. The amount of fuel one person consumes, that rich man consumes, is the same as the truck driver would consume for the whole day. So one person is paying the same amount of tax on that fuel consumed as the about 20 or 30 people in the truck will be consuming. So that is the operation of a consumption tax. By its nature, the more you consume, the more you pay. So if the research is suggesting that rich people are paying the same as poor people on these consumable items, then what it means is that in Ghana, the rich people and the poor people are all consuming the same amount. And if that is the case, well, if you are poor and you can consume as much as rich people consume, then maybe you should pay the tax as the rich man is consuming. I think inherent in consumption tax is the issue he raised about poor people paying less and rich people paying more. So that point has to be taken on board. And then I The example you referred to, to further the point I just made, if a rich man decides to buy 5 televisions for their home, he pays VAT on all 5. A poor man may choose to have just one in the sitting room. The poor man pays 1. That's the point I'm making about consumption tax. So, in itself, I think the operation of a consumption tax is progressive in itself. It taxes the rich more than the poor. And then 2, I think Mr. Kusi also has to avert, and his team will have to avert their mind to the fact that on the food items, the tomatoes, there's no VAT on it. Or the point he made that we should take taxes off items that are in the basket of low-income families or households. All those items now do not have taxes. Tomatoes, the garris, and they don't have VAT on it.
But the fuel prices, if you're paying more for fuel prices, it automatically affects all of these things. So, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I was making the point. I was making the point that if I'm paying more on petroleum prices, that automatically affects, these items that you mentioned.
I agree with you, but the point I am making, the point he made, which I'm responding to, is the fact that items consumed by low-income people. I am making the case that fuel is not an item consumed more by poor people. The point always is made that the truck driver, the taxi driver, if you look at fuel consumption in Ghana, the poor people, that's the example I cited, that 30 people are in one bus. And if you look at the amount of fuel those 30 people would consume on their way to work, and you compare it to what a rich man using a V8 consumes, you can in no way say that the 30 people, you divide it as 4 gallons that they will drive to work, the 30 people have to share 4 gallons. They consume a small fraction per person. The rich man, perhaps with their child going to school, in a vehicle that may even consume, most of these luxury vehicles, they consume far more than our trucks and buses on the street. So the simple point I'm making is that those items that are really used more by poor people, if you look at the VAT Act, are exempted from VAT. And I'm just respectfully suggesting that attention is paid to that. And then if I can make just this point and allow you to proceed with the discussion, you see, if you look at tax to GDP ratio, Ghana is still very low. We under 70% compared with other countries. Our VAT is 17.5. You get to many countries, 22, 25. And the charge, when we state managers of the economy have met our donors and the multilateral agencies, is that your taxes are too low. That's what they're telling us now. Now in Ghana, the people who are working in the formal sector, those people are taxed because you just take their pay, you take it out. The burden on government is to spread the tax net to cover the informal sector. Now, if we are now being told that that informal sector is already overtaxed, then the question we should be asking is, so in Ghana, how come that tax levels in Ghana compared with tax levels in other countries of similar economies, lower income economy, how come ours is so low? And I think I will be happy if the research can take a look at all this so that they can help government shape our tax landscape so that taxes can really be used as an instrument to promote growth and burden less those who cannot afford.
All right. I think that Mr. Kusi has some responses, but just before you come in on the issue of petroleum, though. Is the deregulation principle the best solution in determining the prices and cost of fuel?
Yes, I think that there should be full deregulation You see, the problem we have had in the past in respect of fuel taxation is that when deregulation means that when the cost of inputs of fuel go up, that is, when the cedi deteriorates, or when crude oil prices go up, fuel prices would go up. Let consumers bear. When fuel prices go down or the exchange rate appreciates and fuel prices come down, let consumers benefit. Because whenever government has tried to intervene, what happens is that fuel prices may go up on the international market. Then government says, you, the OMCs and the people in the petroleum sector, don't pass the price on. Me, government, I'll pay because I want to cushion. Throughout our history, when government say that, the OMCs and the BDCs, they don't pass the price on, but then it develops under recoveries. Then they become national debt. Then as our debt increases, the city begins to depreciate. And it is the same poor man who gets most hurt. When the city is depreciating and the price of chalewate, the price of everything is rising, the rich man doesn't feel it that much. In any case, food is a small part of his consumption basket. So they don't really feel it. It is our poor people who suffer. So the management of these and the recoveries has to be looked at. I think that we should go full deregulation, and my disappointment with the way we managed fuel in the past is that we said we were practicing deregulation. And then when fuel prices were coming down, instead of allowing the consumer to benefit from the relief, we put in taxes to arrest the relief. With the burden that now you have some of these taxes, then people are advocating they ought to be taken away. I agree that we need to take a look not just at the taxes on fuel, because the people who pay taxes on fuel, they are the same people who pay VAT on financial services. It is the same people who pay the kaya year rate. It's the same people who pay the airfares, all of which taxes we have abolished. So when we sit down to look at tax policy, we are not just thinking about fuel and dealing with it in some silo. We look across the tax landscape and to see where we should keep taxes and where we should reduce taxes. So, well, we should all begin to go deregulation. When prices go up, we should pass it on to consumers. When prices go down, we should allow consumers to enjoy the relief. And lastly, if prices really go up abnormally, as happened in July 2008, when crude oil prices hit $147 a barrel, when we get to that point, then we know that this is really a national disaster. We take it as a national disaster, and then government can come in the same way we come in when there's a disaster. But ordinarily, I think there should be deregulation. That is the only way we can have a credible fuel pricing policy that will not develop under recoveries to hurt the economy and hurt the poor man in its path.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kweku Kwarteng. He's Deputy Finance Minister, and he's been sharing his thoughts on our conversation this morning, where we're looking at fiscal policies and how we can better manage it to fix our country's inequalities and all the shortfalls. In the studio, though, I still have Apia Kusiadomako, who is the Center Coordinator for Cuts. Your response to the Minister's submission.
Okay, so first, when we use the word consumption basket, we're not necessarily looking at food items, but items that the poor people uses. That is the one correction that I would like to make across. Now, on the fuel, the minister said that whenever the prices in the world market goes low, the government, instead of passing off the relief to the consumers, then put taxes on it. These taxes, the special petroleum taxes, came in 2014, and now I think that with high prices in the world market and the couple of the cedi depreciating, I think that we have to come to understanding that this is not the best time to keep the tax. That tax needs to be scrapped so that consumers of petroleum can enjoy.
So for you, we should have been able to scrap all 17.5%.
I mean, for now, because now it's still high. I mean, it's more than $1 to a liter of petrol, and we think that taking the taxes off will kind of increase consumer welfare. Of course, it's going to bring about deficit, but I can tell you how the deficit...
create shortfalls in the budget.
Yes, but look, the research also found out that Ghana loses close to $1.3 billion annually as a result
of tax exemptions.
Tax exemption to multinational corporations operating and doing business here. We went to IMF for what? $900 million for a period of 3 years. So on the average, $300 million every year that IMF is giving us, and we are doling out $1.3 billion annually. Now, the $1.3 billion translates into what? 80% of education budget, 2/3 of education budget, or 80% of health budget. That means that if we restructure all these things, we can get a lot of revenue to shore up the budget shortfalls.
That is really staggering, and I'm thinking, once this revelation scare off potential investors?
I think, you see, the days when Africa used to be a risk place to do investment is gone. Now people are coming. In the past, when Ghanaians go abroad to study, they don't come back. Today, whoever finishes his studies abroad, they are coming back because there's so much opportunities here. And if we give this exemption to foreigners and local business operating here, we are not giving to them. We are not being fair to them, because the foreign companies, when they come and they make profit, they take everything away. And repatriating their profit also put a lot of pressure on the cities. But if they give the money, if we were to give similar incentives to local businesses, I'm very sure that that could even help the economy to grow. So the tax exemption to multinationals, I think that we have to take it off and rather tax them and use it to balance our budget in education and health sector.
I mean, one will say that it is to attract investment into the country. But probably, per your suggestion or recommendation, we're having to take a second look at that. We're wrapping up, but I want us to touch just slightly on property taxes. And are you concerned, or are you worried that the assemblies are not able to cash in on property taxes?
I am very, very concerned that assemblies, for example, AMA sits on a gold, but yet they are begging for silver. AMA has more properties in its jurisdiction than any other assemblies. And like we said, that an average of 2 billion cedis can be made from property taxes. And this money can be used to support and help the poor in the society in Accra. And then government can then even reduce the district common fund allocation to AMA and give it to the poorer regions and reduce inequalities elsewhere. So I think that property taxes is the way forward if we want to also make life better for the poor in a society. Because property taxes, the tax that you pay is a function of the property that you live in and the location. That means that the rich will pay more and the poor will also pay less. And let me add that even one of my suggestions is that even churches also would also have to be made to pay property taxes. Because churches are making...
that? This conversation has come up, well, but it hasn't necessarily been to property, but it's usually kind of hovered around the offertory that comes in, because a lot of these churches are getting a lot of money from congregants and all of that. Why property tax, not the offertory bits, which has always been under discussion?
The churches are seen as non-profit, and non-profit don't pay taxes. So that means that we need to actually go and amend the tax laws. But the local government Act 462 gives exemption to churches. But I think that churches have got the means to pay. In taxes, we have what we call vertical equity. Those with the ability to pay must be able to pay more. And so churches with resources, I mean, it's not wrong for us to say a church operating in East Legon to pay 10,000 cedis to the assembly to help keep the upkeep of the assembly, because you are enjoying a lot of street cleaning, you are enjoying so many services, and you are not paying for it. And I think that it is not fair to the assembly.
It's all going to support the work of God, to spread the gospel.
Yes.
Avia Kusiado Mako, Center Coordinator for CATS. You heard the Deputy Finance Minister. He says you should make available a copy of this research document to government so they can better, raise revenue.
Yes.
For development of our country. Let's hear from you on that one.
So let me make a few corrections. So the research work was conducted between Oxfam and with a collaboration with CAT. So we are part of the team.
Okay.
And as part of this particular project, we are also meeting parliamentary select committees on finance, education, and health to also explain to them how fiscal policies can be used to address inequalities. And also, we will also make a submission to the Ministry of Finance on how to reduce the overexposure of the poor to indirect taxes and thereby reduce inequalities in the system.
All right. Well, thank you once again. Obviously, too many taxes in the price build-up across sectors. Let's see how best we can deal with it as a country. That wraps up our conversation, but we have some other very interesting ones coming up. Still live on GH1 TV, and this is GH Today with us, your TV Royals. Stay with us.
No, I've never been someone shy until I seen your eyes. Still I had to try. Yeah. Oh yes, let me get my words right and then